Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Desiree Frazier, sitting in for Wilson Stribling. Welcome to another edition of At Issue, where we discuss and debate the critical issues facing the state of Mississippi and how these issues impact you. At issue tonight, the impending rewrite of the Mississippi Adequate Education Program. It's the formula used to fund public schools with state tax dollars each year. During the summer, Republican leadership hired EdBuild, an education consulting group, to make recommendations on how to improve funding school districts. Republicans say the formula is outdated and needs to be upgraded. However, Democrats have said they've been shut out of the process. On Thursday, hundreds of people who support the state's public education funding formula rallied at the Capitol. The group included educators, students, clergy, business professionals, and state lawmakers. They want K-12 education fully funded, and they want a seat at the table to provide input if and when changes are to be made to the formula. They say so far it's been a closed process.
We won't change in Mississippi in any category until we put public education of every child as the #1 priority in this state. I think the public needs to get outraged about the secret dealings going on down here about their children and grandchildren.
People are sick and tired of what's going on with public education in the state of Mississippi, and that they're here to say that enough is enough. We need to stop consolidating our schools. We need to make sure that our children are educated, and we need to make sure that our schools are fully funded to give the citizens of this state, the children of this state, an opportunity to be successful in today's society.
State lawmakers have already set aside $2.2 billion to fund K-12 education next budget year. But there's been no MAEP legislation brought forward to this point. One option Governor Phil Bryant has is to call a special session on the issue. MPB's Mark Rigsby asked Governor Bryant and House Speaker Philip Gunn when a bill to rewrite MAEP would be ready and when a special session could be called.
When will you call a special session to rewrite the MAEP funding formula based on the EdBuild recommendation?
I will, as soon as the Speaker and Lieutenant Governor have a bill, as soon as we look at it, review it, and as soon as there's an agreement between the leadership in the House and the Senate. If you call a special session and you spend 2 weeks fighting, that's very expensive for the taxpayers. So we're going to make sure that we are prepared for a special session if one needs to be called.
Can you give us a timetable of when we're going to see something on the table so that the governor can call that session?
Well, I don't know about a timetable. I just know that we're going to get the bill in the right form. I've said it all along. We're going to do it right rather than do it rushed. We feel like we're making good progress. When the time comes when we get to that point, we'll notify the governor and we'll move forward.
Do you think it will be before the end of this session?
I don't know. I can't project. I just know we're going to continue to work on it, and we get it done, we'll do it.
Work continues at the Capitol on the state budget as both the House and the Senate pass appropriations bills for state agencies. It's another tight budget year with state revenue collections not meeting projections. Once again, state agency budgets are being cut. Democrats accuse Republicans for pushing the state into bad financial shape due to a failing tax policy. We hear now from House Minority Leader Representative David Beria of Bay St. Louis and Senate Minority Leader Bill Stone of Holly Springs.
As how we got here, we believe it's a combination of the sluggish economy, and by sluggish we mean our economy in Mississippi is lagging behind the rest of the country. But more importantly, we believe a major cause of this is the tax cuts and tax credits that we passed, some of which going back to the beginning of this decade. We hear a lot of talk around the Capitol of the problems we have: infrastructure crisis, roads and bridges, problems, our underperforming public schools. We get calls all the time from our local officials and from our constituents about capacity issues with the Department of Mental Health. But there's one underlying cause to all of those problems, and that is the fact that we simply don't have enough money to fund the core basic functions of state government. Now, we spent a lot of time trying to reform this, realign that, reconfigure agencies. A lot of debate, a lot of time goes into that. But at the end of the day, we're, as the old saying goes, rearranging chairs on a sinking ship. If we don't do something about our revenue problem going forward, it's only going to get worse.
I know you've all seen the legislative economic briefing. It doesn't paint a very rosy picture. In the fourth quarter, employment slowed, income growth has slowed, transfers to the general fund have been very weak. I think that you could sum all of that up by saying that the tax cuts that we passed over the past few years, which were designed to stimulate economic growth, have not done that. And in fact, it appears that the situation has worsened. We're not, we don't think it's likely that any of those tax cuts can be rolled back in the short term. But there is a very big tax cut, which, as you know, will take effect beginning July 1st. We think it would be prudent and a prudent business decision to postpone the implementation of those tax cuts. If you are running a business and you have capital expenditures that you need to make and you're in a downturn, you don't make those capital expenditures, you put them off. If you want to hire new people, you might put those types of additional expenses off as well. We don't think that our budget can stand another $400+ million in tax cuts, at least not at this point. So that's one of the things that we think that can be done. You know, this group supports a lottery that would generate some revenue. The estimates vary on that. And then, of course, there's the internet tax issue that the House has passed a couple of times. So those are, we don't want to just be critical of leadership. We want to offer solutions, and we would like to be a part of the process.
Meanwhile, Governor Bryant and House Speaker Gunn disagree with the Democrats' assertion.
Well, it's just ridiculous. If you look at tax reductions on businesses, it's the reason we have Nissan. It's the reason we have Yokohama Tire. It's the reason we have Toyota. It's the reason that we're building 70% of the Navy's warships at Pascagoula at Ingalls Shipbuilding. It's the reason Raytheon's building the most advanced radar systems in the world at Forest. So if you take away those tax incentives for businesses to be here, you're going to probably remove 40 or 50,000 jobs. So if that's what they want, we can turn that back, but the unemployment rate is going to jump from 5.5% to probably 12. I don't think that's what they want. I don't think they've really thought through this.
Well, we ran for office on the platform of increasing prosperity in our state. I mean, you do that through creation of jobs, tax cuts, tax incentives, all the things that are designed to help create jobs. Those are the things we've done. That's the platform that we ran on. That's the platform that the people of the state of Mississippi elected us to carry out. Part of that is reducing the size of government. I think that's a fine thing to do, to reduce the size of government. So there's not a crisis. I think that is just political, a political attempt to try to create fire where there is none. We don't apologize for reducing the size of government. We don't apologize for tightening our belt. I think the citizens do that in their personal homes. I think businesses do that, and I think that's the responsibility of government to stay within our means. Right now, we have a situation where our sister states are running deficits. They're spending more money than they have, and we got money in the bank. So that is a practice that I'm proud of. Over the last 6 years, we have stayed within our means. We have created incentives for companies to come to Mississippi. Part of that is tax breaks. They are coming, they are creating jobs. Our people are going to work, they're producing goods and services, and that's how you increase wealth and prosperity.
Women from across Mississippi rallied at the Capitol this week, demanding equal pay for equal work.
They're women, but not Mississippi. With the highest represent Pike County.
The group Making Mississippi Women Secure says women in this state earn 25 cents less for every dollar earned by men. That equals nearly $400,000 in earning potential over a lifetime. Equal pay for equal work legislation died in committee this session. The group's leader, Cassandra Welchland, says businesses are concerned about facing wage discrimination lawsuits if equal pay legislation passes.
I think two things. One, I think this whole cultural norm that we have in this state about the worth of a woman's work. And then also, I think that is one. But I also think, and what we've had the conversation with why it didn't get wings, is because employers were worried that this was going to open up the floodgates to lawsuits. And we had conversations with them about, different kinds of options that we can put in place, but they wanted to really sit down and work through that. And so we're going to take them up on that offer. And as soon as the session ends, we're going to go back in with these leaders and also the business community, the Economic Council, to say we want to have a conversation with you about what would make this work for you without compromising what is important for the women in the workplace, which is they need to have equal wages for their work.
There are 2 bills that have passed both chambers and signed by the governor into law. House Bill 812 deals with civil asset forfeiture. The state will now maintain a website to track all money and assets seized through civil court by law enforcement. Supporters of the bill say it ensures transparency and cuts down on abuse. The governor has also signed House Bill 967, which authorizes the Mississippi Gaming Commission to regulate daily fantasy sports betting in the state. The back of the badge bill, which increases penalties for harming a police officer, firefighter, or emergency medical responder, is heading to the governor for his signature. Let's get straight to the point with views from both sides of the aisle. Brandon Jones is a Democrat. He's an attorney with the Barbour Jones law firm and a former member of the House. Austin Barbour is a Republican and national strategist, and he's the founding partner of Clearwater Group. And we thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
All right. Let's begin by talking about education. And Austin, we had the Senate pass a House bill, $2.2 billion plus $20 million for incentive programs. When are we going to see a bill come out to deal with this rewrite? We've been hearing about it throughout the legislative session, but we haven't seen it.
Yeah, I think you were really smart the way you posed that question to me. You started with what I think is the most important aspect of this, Desiree, and Brandon is already chomping at the bit to get across at me on this, but it's a record funding amount, $2.2 billion. And I'm glad that you said that because I think we can't miss the forest for the trees on this issue. Brandon's going to hit some points that he feels very strongly about. I'm not going to take those away from him before he even gets to do that. But listen, I think the number one issue that the speaker, the lieutenant governor, and the governor and sort of the leadership have to point to in sort of, let's just say, their 8-year run as being in charge is education. They've had more victories on education than I think any other policy issue. Record amount of funding, teacher pay raise, charter schools, 3rd grade reading gate, which means that a child cannot go from 3rd to 4th grade if they can't read. Can you believe that? Before, we did not have that policy. And when you go and you look and see, well, what's the proof points here? Graduation rates have gone up. But you ask a really important question that I want to make sure I answer. I have said a dozen times on this show, I thought this was a 2-year process. It will probably be the biggest policy issues that most of these legislators deal with throughout their whole tenure of being in the legislature. Huge issue, and I did not know that they could do it in 1 year. I think it's still going to be a 2-year issue, but that's just my opinion. But again, I think education is something these guys and girls have done a fantastic job with.
You know, one of the real stories in Mississippi politics over the last several years is the growth of these member groups that are just citizens interested in education policy. And you saw some of the effects of that at the Capitol this week was, you know, hundreds of people stood around talking about a place at the table. And for me, that's really a good theme of our show and a good theme of this legislative session, a place at the table. What these activists and what these moms and what these parents and what these ministers are talking about is simply wanting to get their hands on what is, as you said, one of the biggest policy issues facing us in this particular moment. You know, I've said it before, when we were little kids, we learned not to let our light get hidden under a bushel. You got to let it shine. If Republicans are proud of their education policy, it's time to put up or shut up. What we have heard is leadership say they don't know what the policy is. We've heard chairmen say we don't know what the policy is. We keep being told that they are working on it, but we have heard no specific, tangible things. It hasn't been vetted in any realistic way by people who are actually educating, by people who are parents. And so that's the way that legislation really succeeds, is to let it take place in a laboratory where people have a chance to vet it, to see what it is, and we haven't had that. It's been hyped. It kind of reminds me, I'm going to show my age here, but we waited about 15 years for Guns N' Roses to come out with that next album. This is like that long-awaited thing, and it's not here. There's nothing to show for it. And so I think these folks who were at the Capitol this week were right to say, if you're proud of this, let us see it. Let us, we recognize it's not a final product, but tell us where you're heading. Tell us a little bit about it. And we don't even have a peek so far.
Brandon lost our audience with the Guns N' Roses reference.
That's an MPB reference if there ever was one.
Do you think we're going to see a special session? The governor has said he would be willing to have a special session within the session, but the time is running out, and we still haven't, as we have just been saying, seen recommendations involving EdBuild. Do you think we're going to see it? Is it going to be over the summer? When do you see that happening?
Yeah, I speak for myself on this. I have not talked to anyone about that specific question, and my gut is no. I don't think we'll see a special session within this session or within 30 days afterwards, because Brandon is right on this. And look, I applaud those folks who come to the Capitol. I may disagree with them sort of philosophically about how we should fund education. I think the thought process of the leadership is, let's focus on student needs. Whether you're a special needs child, a gifted child, a child in inner city Jackson, or a child in a rural area, let's not just go say, we're going to give X amount of dollars to a specific district because of that district. Let's get deeper than that, okay? Let's get much more micro than that and go to the child. That is what I think the philosophy of what EdBuild wanted to do. I think that is the philosophy that leadership is grasping a hold to. But what these folks who came to the Capitol are saying, and what Brandon's saying, is right. We can have a thorough debate about what's actually in the bill. There's not been a bill that's been public. That's why I think we are a ways away. That doesn't mean they won't come back this fall. That doesn't mean they won't come back this winter. Or they may just say, let's just wait till next year. Again, I go back. I've said this is a 2-year process. So that's my very long-winded answer to you.
Okay. Moving on, budget crisis. The Democrats met and had a news conference this week, and they talked about the state is in a budget crisis, and it is something that has not been discussed. And we just keep saying we're going to make cuts, we're going to make cuts.
Yeah, this has been a big issue on this show. It's been a big issue throughout the year. Our current economy is working at a level that's about 52 million shy of where it was last year. For this entire fiscal year, we haven't hit the number of estimate tax returns yet. We are looking at about $133 million budget shortfall overall, which has led to 3 cuts by Governor Bryan, and pretty good chances we'll see more, which has been felt across all of our state agencies. I think that in Mississippi, we sometimes have a self-esteem problem. We sometimes get so accustomed to not performing at optimum level that it gets kind of comfortable to say, well, this is kind of the Mississippi way. Our economy isn't as good as, Nevada's. It's not as good as New Hampshire's, whatever the case may be. And I think that's unfortunate, because you shouldn't look at budgeting or at decision-making like you do the weather. These moments, this particular moment that we are in, this particular financial crisis is connected to decision-making. Republicans have decided and put all of their eggs in the basket of, we're going to tax cut our way into the black. It has been working its way through this state legislature for 5 years now, and we're seeing the payoff, which is a bad payoff. I heard Speaker Gunn say a moment ago, we ran on a ticket about success in our economy. We ran on a ticket of success. Well, if that's true, he has failed. And the people who said they ran on that record have failed, because this economy is failing. And at some point, Republicans have to own the decisions that have created this economy.
Yeah, no, I can understand where you're coming from on that. And I think that Bill Stone, who's a Democrat, I guess he's the minority leader in the Senate, is right. We do have a sluggish economy. And I think when you look at some other states around our region and around the country, it's not just a Mississippi issue that we're having to deal with. I don't want to try to just make excuses. I think this mentality that you bring up of, well, we're Mississippi and things are just bad going to happen. We shouldn't have that philosophy. And I don't think I know Republicans don't have that mentality. They're trying to figure out ways of if we follow our ideology of smaller government, more money back to taxpayers, that will in turn allow businesses to create more jobs and pay people more money. That's what we believe in. I've always said this. voters have a choice. And in 2019, voters will have a choice. They'll look at the record, and it won't just be on taxes. It'll be on jobs. It'll be on education. It'll be on health care. It'll be on all these different issues. But yeah, you're right. But I think that we have to find a way to govern our way out of this. I certainly don't believe that government is the answer to a whole lot of things. But I think if government will give businesses and individuals, small businesses in particular, the tools that they need to focus on ways to create more business for themselves and improve their businesses. And if government will also just focus on the core functions of what we should be focused on, that's how we, quote, govern our way out of this. And I don't think it's going to happen in 1 year. Brandon, I think he's smart to do this. He talks about, sort of the Democrat line, which is we pass all these tax cuts over and over. There was a massive tax cut that was passed last year in 2016. We got rid of a franchise tax, which affects big businesses, Nissan, Toyota, oil and gas companies, but it also affects small mom and pop businesses. And well, it does, man. It really does. That cut helps them. Obviously, it's not as much money, but they're not doing as much businesses as a Nissan or a Toyota. So these franchise taxes will help them. They got rid of the 3% income tax. It's not a tax that affects us because we're making more money than that. I just think it takes time. And I think people got to be patient, and I understand why they see the governor having to make cut after cut after cut, and they worry, and they do, and I understand that. But this is one of these where you really have to let the process work its way out and see where we are, particularly as we head into Election Day. Well, that's fair or not. That's what I believe.
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of seen this blueprint play out in Kansas and Louisiana. It's been an absolute disaster. I mean, the Republicans there are doing everything they can to undo what's been done. And I think that was part of the message. You heard Leader Beria say it. Really, more than anything else, and I think you said something that came close to this, Democrats just want a place at the table. Right now, Republicans have to take full ownership, good or bad, of this economy simply because they have elbowed Democrats out of the process. I think that if you really want to have an effective kind of governing body, it ought to be a little bit bigger, ought to be a little bit more room for compromise. And look, some of these cuts, Austin, they are so hard to take back. Look at Kansas. Look at Louisiana. They wish so much that they could undo tax decisions that were made 5 years ago, and it's costing them in a major way. And so that's why I think you heard Democrats saying two things. Give us a spot at the table, and then number two, exercise caution. If you hit the pause button on some of these big breaks, it's not a tax hike. It's simply not allowing some of the deepest cuts to go into effect.
I think the give us a seat at the table is fair. And I think what you and I will remember is that David Beria and Philip Gunn at the beginning. David Beria, who's the minority leader in the House, and of course Philip Gunn is the Speaker, said, look, we're going to meet once a week, we're going to talk, we're going to be open. I'm not in the middle of the weeds on that. You probably are a little bit more because your relationship with Representative Beria. So I think they have been open to having those conversations.
All right. Let's talk about infrastructure. It was the issue at the start of the session. It's one of the issues at the end of the session, but nothing has really come of the issue.
Yeah, we talked last week. Republicans passed a bill. It's sitting in the Senate now. I talked to some of my Senate friends and asked them what they thought the likelihood of that bill passing was. They don't think it's great, but as Austin always admonishes me, you got to be patient. Until it's dead, it's not dead. And so we'll see. But one thing I didn't really get a chance to hit on as hard as I probably should have last week is this isn't an infrastructure program like the one that has been requested by MEC and other companies. Now, they're happy to take the money. The $50 million bond is good, but that's a one-time payment. That's not any type of recurring revenue source.
And it's not enough money.
Well, that's right. I mean, what you're talking about is something that would just barely hit what our highway pros tell us would be maintenance level for a short time period. Remember, the number that was thrown out at the beginning of the session was $350 million. So we're talking about less than 20% of what was initially requested. So, look, what I said was it's nice to see that we haven't completely extinguished talking about this, but I think that we have to be realistic about where we stand and what's on the table. And this isn't the type of infrastructure plan that the business community was requesting when January came.
I think this is one of the great things about this show. Applause for this show. Look, it gives us the opportunity to really get in the weeds and talk about issues that, quite frankly, with the newscast, they just don't have time. They got a 30-second hit, a 90-second hit, and, maybe you get a quote or two that's a couple sentences. But infrastructure is so important. It is. I talked about core functions of government. Infrastructure is one of those. There's no doubt about it. And because NBC came forth in the beginning and said, well, we got to have $325 million, that doesn't really mean that we need $325 million to achieve everything. That's a little bit like saying, well, if MAEP is not fully funded, then we're not really funding education. I don't know about that. Listen, we obviously need much more money to go into infrastructure. You're smart to throw the $325 out on less than 20% from a $50 million bond. But candidly, the bill that the House passed last week, the Senate is looking at it right now. Your sources say it may be dead. My sources say it's getting very serious consideration, and we'll see what the Senate does. I'm not going to try to guess. Does have a $50 million bond bill in there. $25 million of that goes to the counties. $25 million of that goes to cities. It also takes the current internet sales tax that is received from big companies like Amazon. That's tens of millions of dollars, plus other companies that the Department of Revenue, led by former Appropriations Chairman Herb Frierson, are out talking with, bringing in all of those funds will go directly to the hole that is, kind of like that hole. There's a hole, pardon the pun there, the infrastructure hole that we have. Bond bill, internet sales tax, and also they said in the very beginning, if you remember this, there's $50 million in savings that they found within MDOT right there. That's $150 million. They have some other ideas. One of them is about 2% growth. They'll take 50% of what's above 2% growth. We can't talk about 2% growth right now.
And we're going to have to leave it there. Gentlemen, we are out of time. Austin Barbour, Brandon Jones, thank you. Don't forget, you can check out the show on our website, mpbonline.org/issue. Please join us again next Friday here on MPB for another edition of At Issue. Good night.